All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're diving into how Ricardo Gomez's novels, The Weight of Choosing and Lucid Interval, really pull back the curtain on the profound ethical realities of end-of-life care. And what makes these books so brilliant is how Gomez uses a mix of deep historical context and subtle fantasy elements to illuminate some deeply complex ethical dilemmas. We're going to explore how these fictions perfectly mirror the very real, often overwhelming choices that families face today, especially regarding death with dignity and advanced directives. We have to start with this absolutely striking quote from the character Father Miguel. It perfectly captures the heavy ethical tension we're unpacking today. What's so fascinating here is how Gomez blends profound, real-world theology with these beautiful touches of magical realism to elevate the whole story. Father Miguel is wrestling with his own theology as his Parkinson's progresses, and he ultimately realizes that supporting a person's autonomy doesn't actually mean abandoning his faith. It's a really powerful illustration of that tightrope walk between preserving life and just prolonging the dying process. Section 1. The Weight of Dementia. A Creeping Reality. 70%. Just let that sink in for a second. As the character Nico discovers in his obsessive research, 70% of people over 85 develop cognitive impairment. He quickly realizes this isn't some abstract, distant possibility for his family. It is an insidious crisis. It's an urgent reality that demands planning before it completely upends your family dynamic overnight. The author shows us this decline so intimately. Take Rosa, who suddenly stands in her kitchen holding milk, totally lost. Or Roberto, who forgets his own daughter, yet his hands, almost by magic, perfectly remember the exact ratio of masa to water for his mother's pupusas. And then there's Nicholas. He's this brilliant engineer shaped by the historical complexities of Colombia, but his sharp mind is slipping. The author uses subtle fantasy here, depicting his dementia as a literal physical mist that swirls around him, a fog only he can interact with. It beautifully and tragically captures how a loved one slips away piece by piece. Section 2. Prolonging Life versus Living Well. So this brings us right to a massive collision of values playing out in hospitals everywhere. On one side, you have the medical system's curative instinct, represented in the books by a young, driven resident named Sophia. She's trained to view death as a failure, right? Something to fight with every tool in the box. But on the other side, you have patient autonomy. The patients in these books are asking a totally different question. What if death isn't the enemy, but just the next natural chapter? I absolutely love this quote. Eduardo's refusal of a heart stent so he can just go home and plant his tomatoes brilliantly illustrates this. He knows the medical risks, for sure, but he refuses to let his final months be defined by beeping hospital machines and strangers. He actively chooses the simple, grounding joy of the soil over a mathematically longer, but frankly, much lower quality life. Section 3. Defining the lucid interval. But here's the really tricky part. How do you honor these choices when a patient's mind has already started to slip away? Well, legally and medically, this brings up the concept of the lucid interval. It's that fleeting, totally unpredictable window where the fog lifts and a person with dementia is suddenly fully present again. In Lucid Interval, Nicholas experiences these brief moments of profound clarity, which means any legal documents he signs during this time are officially binding. And this is where that magical realism truly shines. Gomez uses the blooming of a borrachero tree in the courtyard as the trigger. Its magical, almost supernatural fragrance physically pierces that literal fog in his mind. When that tree blooms, Nicholas is entirely himself again, the sharp engineer who knows exactly what he wants. But it creates an agonizing situation for his daughter, Lucia. She finds herself trapped. She knows her father's moral wishes perfectly, but she desperately needs the legal instrument to force the medical system to honor them. Without that signed piece of paper, executed during a lucid interval, the medical defaults just take over, completely bulldozing the patient's deeply held values. Section 4. Laws of End-of-Life Choice. Now, this is a striking reality. Geography literally dictates the boundaries of your medical autonomy. The novels draw a sharp contrast between real-world legal frameworks. Look at Washington State versus Columbia. In Washington, you need a terminal diagnosis of 6 months or less, which actively excludes early-stage dementia. But in Colombia, and this is heavily tied to its history of complex civil conflict and court rulings that elevate human dignity above all else, a terminal illness isn't strictly required if there is intense, incurable suffering. So conditions like advanced dementia can actually qualify there. It vividly highlights the urgent global need for clear, modernized legislation around cognitive decline. And when legal-assisted dying isn't an option, the sources impartially explore VSED, voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. It requires no terminal diagnosis, just a signed advance directive and a rock-solid support system. It is a really sobering path, but for characters facing irreversible dementia in places without expansive laws, it becomes their ultimate assertion of agency.
Section 5. The Power of Chosen Family.
Because you cannot face these immense medical and legal hurdles alone, the characters build their own supportive community when traditional systems fail them. They form what they call the Covenant of 80. It's an agreement to support each other's conscious choices about aging, dementia, and medical care. This isn't just a casual promise over dinner. It's a rigorous, binding moral commitment to act as healthcare proxies. They establish strict rules. They agree to honor autonomy over their own protective instincts, which, let's be honest, is incredibly hard to do. They offer presence without judgment, and they update their preferences every single year. Ultimately, it's about loving someone enough to let them go on their own terms. There's a character named David, a former foster child who is absolutely terrified of abandonment. Initially, he views advance directives as kind of abandoning his family. But through the pact, he realizes that creating healthcare proxies for his teenage daughters is actually the ultimate act of love. By doing the heavy lifting while he's healthy, he's sparing his grieving kids from having to guess his wishes during a crisis.
Section 6. Writing your own ending.
So the ultimate takeaway from these stories isn't really about dying at all. It's about living consciously right up to the very end. The crucial point is the urgent need to write your own ending before cognitive decline strips away your voice. It's simple. Decide what honors your values, legalize it in an advance directive, and make sure your people know where it is. Do not let your care default to a standard medical protocol that doesn't fit who you are. Just as the engineer Mauricio observes in the book, laying out your end-of-life plans builds a stable structure of peace for the family that survives you. You're taking the burden off their shoulders and building a bridge of clarity that will support them long after you're gone. I want to leave you with this one final provocative thought. If you lost your memory tomorrow, who would know how to write your ending? Who actually holds your story? And maybe more importantly, do they have the legal instruments and the moral clarity to honor it? Have these vital conversations today, you guys, while the interval is still lucid.